charter that we've written.
Based on what Barry just said, it's silent. So from my perspective, how we design the forum, hearing, whatever you want to call it, can be whatever we want it to be, as long as we provide time for the public to voice their opinions.
Yeah, I don't think, I think it has to be solely about citizens presenting their views. So it's not an iterative process.
Okay.
It's not a, let's discuss. It's,
Okay.
here's the charter.
All right,
They can
so
make
we're-
comment. They can, it's for you to hear their comments.
Can I just say, here's the charter? What does that mean? We've posted it on the, online a week before the hearing, and they can read it, and then they come in and just talk at us? Or does it mean we give a presentation, explain some things a little bit more in detail, and then the public makes their comments?
You could combine your meeting, which is a presentation could be part of the hearing, which could be theoretically the commission presenting what it wants to have the hearing on. But ultimately, once it starts, it's like evidence. So the best way to describe it is that I would foresee, and trying to be conservative to protect the process from any potential challenge,
Yeah.
is that you present the charter, you can present a summary if you like, but after that, it is for the citizens and other interested parties to present their views as to the work you've done. It's a hearing on that matter. And then as if you're really playing two roles in the hearing. So you're presenting the charter, you're hearing ultimately the work, and then ultimately you get to be the judge as well, and you make the decision. So in this case, the judge has a little bit more work, which is to just present an overview if you'd like, but beyond that, it is a hearing.
Well, that's the required hearing.
Yes.
Right,
Prior
so
to
we
the
could
vote.
do that, and then we could do some more that are a little bit more,
Then you
have
have
more engagement,
More open,
conversational,
flow.
yeah.
That you have a statutory responsibility to educate the public. So that's where I think your forums come in. You have to educate the public.
Okay, but it's not just
That's-
educating, it's getting feedback before we make the final decision in
That's-
case we want to change our mind about something.
That's the public hearing.
Okay, I would say that one of those is not adequate.
Well, you can have more than one. You're required to have
I
at
would
least one.
agree.
That's all I'm saying.
Oh, I'm
One of
sorry.
those is not adequate.
We would have to schedule them.
Yeah, I know that,
The question is when.
which
So
is
we-
why I asked for this information
Okay.
before I went on vacation.
Mr. Chairman, the memo outlines, certain dates, and there is a window, basically the 1st of August through the 15th, at which, Ms. Rufo, those one or more public hearings could be held in
Yeah,
that window.
I mean, I believe that's what we suggested
Yeah.
in our report to the commission in our last meeting, is that we use those 3 dates in August for this kind of activity.
That posits the fact that the draft or the proposed charter would be completed by the end of July.
Yeah, I understand that.
Right.
I mean, I know it's fluid right now, we just got this information, I'm not saying
Yeah.
that we have to
And-
make
and-
any determination. From my
and-
perspective, I'd like to really look at this, look at the calendar,
Mm-hmm.
think about what, the things that the committee has talked about and share, get some, what's reality, what can we actually get done?
And can I just, so as far as like the status of the draft at the time of the hearing, does it have to be completely complete or substantially complete, or what's that? Substantially?
Right.
Yeah, it needs to be the
Change it,
draft,
then
yeah.
more.
Right.
Right. Because you're giving people something.
Because we're,
You
that's the
can't
opportunity
you
for us to
cannot have
hear.
sections that are undone. You have to have essentially the consensus of the commission
Yep.
to present this document for public hearing. So, for example, and I'm using it only because it's one of the things that might be driving some of this conversation, is the city council subcommittee work. You cannot have the public hearings if you have not completed the council section of the ordinance of the charter. It's actually the most significant, one of the most significant provisions of the charter. So your timing is all based on, you're getting a little bit more time, but not substantially more than what was originally given. And the whole basis for this is the time frame that Pell was working with you on throughout the process was based on most election boards ask for the referendum to be submitted to them 13 weeks prior to the election. It's not a mandate in the code as to what the time frame is. It's left to the election board to set it. Lancaster County's confirmed that they'll give us a couple of extra weeks till September 1st. That's when their absolute printing deadline is. There is no wiggle room in that deadline whatsoever. So, what I think, what you have now is a couple of extra weeks in the August area for some wiggle room that you didn't have previously.
Okay.
I had a question about, I guess it would be about the hearing. Is there any time that the public could ask questions and we could respond? Because I noticed during our public comment, it's only comment. I don't know if like at the public engagement, are people asking questions? I think we had at our finance committee, because it was so small, someone asked a question and we were able to answer it. But that's the only time that I know a question was asked and we were able to provide an answer.
So the answer to that is at all of your meetings, including this one, there'll be opportunity for public comment. You can answer questions. That's always been a choice. If you wish to answer them, though, keep in mind that anybody up here that's answering is not answering for the commission. You're answering for yourself as a commissioner, because there hasn't been a vote by this body to answer in a particular way. So that's the rub. At the public hearing, typically you would have your presentation, you would have citizens comment. It's still a meeting, so you could then respond after the, quote, testimony is closed, and make comments back and forth. But ultimately, you're required to have a public hearing where the public is given the right to comment and provide opinion on the work that you've been doing.
And I seen in public comment on the website, there are people that ask questions. Do we respond or no? I know I haven't, but I'm just saying, is there a response from the commission or not?
No.
No, I have not been responded. There's a
No.
few that I responded to, but it's only been like one or two, because not a lot of the questions are
Yes and no.
yes and no questions. Or things that I could easily point to, so. But I have answered a few people's questions.
Okay.
When it was information I could easily provide.
I would also note that during the education part of this, once you approve the referendum and approve a charter, you are going to have multiple months at which you are actually charged with educating. And by educating, that does mean answering questions. So
Right.
the point really being is that you'll be in a better position to answer questions after you've actually ratified a charter to go on referendum, because then you can speak for the entirety of the commission in what is in the actual charter.
Okay, so we have a tentative schedule.
Right. The one thing I would add, just on behalf of Commissioner Elias, because I've heard her talk about this at our public engagement, is I think she does have plans to be out of town second half of August. I can't remember exactly the dates.
I think it's the 16th.
I
Starts on the 16th.
Yeah, I think her time, and so she specifically planned that, expecting our work to be
Yeah.
mostly complete by then. So, I think, to the extent that it's possible to be at the finish line before she leaves would be a courtesy to her.
Okay.
And,
I would like to finish it as soon as possible.
right, yeah.
And one quick thing, you said July the 25th is going to be a meeting date? or
That
not?
is, we're kind of reserving that if we need it. It was originally our working date for the public hearing, having hopefully approved the charter the week before. Now we have this extra about 2 weeks. So while July 25th is still there, it would not be the public hearing, because we can't have the public hearing until we have voted for the charter. And then,
No, we have. the
or I'm
hearing
sorry,
first.
the other way around.
Yeah.
We have to have the charter
Or-
finished before we have the public hearing
Right.
and then vote. I'm sorry, misspoke.
Before your vote.
Yes.
Right.
And since we have 2 more weeks, plus the city council committee
Right.
is planning on meeting through the end of July,
Yes.
the idea of having the public hearing on the 25th seems a
Right.
little premature.
Right, I just needed to know if I needed to put that in my calendar, July the 25th.
Can you put it in pencil? Okay. Any other comments on my updating on the schedule? All right. Thank you. Next order of business is public comments. You are the public, if
Yes,
you would
ma'am.
like to speak.
I did send
Yes, Ms. Shapiro.
a thing to everybody. I don't know if they read it
Uh,
or not.
Can you,
You're going to have to actually go to the microphone and give us your name and your street. Is the mic on? There's a button with.
Yeah, and it's green now. My name is Mimi Shapiro, and I live at 239 North Concord Street in Lancaster. My only comment and question, I appreciate greatly all the work that all these people are doing, because it's an awesome task to figure it out and to give us information. You know, I have that big book that I've read, but it's not, I'm sure it's not the answer, it's just about what the process is. We got those early on, I don't know. I picked it up here. Anyway, my comment, question, whatever, and I think Tony tried to explain it to me, did explain it to me, that they're having a meeting again at 9 o'clock tonight after this meeting, which I don't know how long this meeting goes, but I think a meeting of the whole commission makes way more sense to me than having little groups of people. I mean, because we all can't be here till, midnight. I mean, it's kind of silly. The ice cream store will be closed. That's the important part. I just think little factions of everybody wanting a different thing doesn't help the whole. And I think Lancaster is a small enough city that we can think of all the different areas as part of the city. When I moved from the east side on Shippen Street to the west side, they said, oh my God, it's so different there. Those people are there. It's the same over here. It's one city. And we're never going to get everybody to agree. But if we work together, that'll make it easier. And we used to have Nelson Polite and Louise Williams, who both came from the south, east, west, I don't know, because I wasn't born here, so I don't even know west from east. But I think it's important to think of this as a whole group of people all wanting to make Lancaster better and better. And, I commend you for all working really hard to get this out to the public, because it's an awesome, awesome task. So, thank you very much. That's my comment.
Thank you very much, Ms. Shapiro.
May I comment for the record?
About,
Just because, I understand that the time, just for the general public, I want to answer to this. I understand the timing of the city council subcommittee is very inconvenient for, the masses. We did it at that time because typically our meetings end at 8:30. We actually tried to schedule it for 8:45 to get running as soon as possible afterwards. It was strictly just because to get this off the ground as soon as possible, we wanted to meet as soon as possible, and this is what worked out. But that is why the future meetings for the city council subcommittee will be meeting earlier. And just given the timeline, we may have to adapt strategy a little bit. I do expect this to be a very intense process, but I do also want to acknowledge that this has been one of the conversations that has had the most back and forth. And up to the extent that we originally believed that once we set things in place, we could not flex the government at all afterwards. And we've now found out that we can rotate between districts or at-large representation even once the charter is adopted. So there's a lot of considerations to make. We've had new information in the last month, I'd say. And so the city council subcommittee meeting isn't necessarily trying to factionalize what the work we're doing. It's just trying to expedite the work because we have had this conversation very robustly as a commission. And I could speak and rant on more about that, but hopefully the meeting afterwards can explain more to where my heart's at and why I do feel that this work is important to go forward. Just to surmise it, it's because even though we are a city as a whole, some parts of town have a very different history that can go all the way back to redlining. And I think that the conversation on
But now you're moving into debate on the
Yeah.
topic, not just a
So-
clarification of your meeting schedule.
So I'll wrap up to say thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other public comments? All right, thank you. Moving on to deliberations on the form of government. I request without objection, we move to a committee of the whole and allow our representatives from PEL to moderate this portion of the meeting. Is there any objection? Hearing none? Mr. Cross, it's all yours. Or Mr. Reddick, or Ms. Shedlock, and tell Ms. Moorhead, I'm sorry she didn't make it tonight. Oh,
We will do that.
okay.
We're going to pick up with several of the appointed official positions that we did not complete yet on the questionnaire, after which we do have a number of draft charter articles that we're going to discuss. But starting with the appointed officials, and please turn to I believe it's the third page, because we've already wrote the article on the solicitor, and it was agreed that the engineer would not be included in the charter. So we're starting with acting mayor. And the language at the top is the language currently in the optional Plan A provisions, where the mayor shall designate any department head or the city clerk to act as mayor whenever the mayor shall be prevented by absence from the city, disability, or other cause from attending to the duties of his office. During such time, the person so designated by the mayor shall possess all the rights, powers, and duties of the mayor. It goes on to say, whenever the mayor shall have been unable to attend to the duties of his office for a period of 60 consecutive days for any of the above stated reasons, a member of council shall be appointed by the council as acting mayor, who shall succeed to all the rights, powers, and duties of the mayor or the then acting mayor. And the questions that we have in order to write this particular section are as follows. May the mayor appoint a designated person to act as mayor to perform mayoral duties in the absence of the mayor? It's question number one.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Is there consensus on that? Okay.
Yep.
Yes.
May the charter limit who is to serve?
Now, when you say limit, how do you mean that? Meaning by job, by residence,
By position, by position.
Oh.
Limit by position.
The way it's currently
President of
written, it
council,
does
member of
not
council, department head, city clerk.
limit. The way it's currently written, I would say it's not limiting. Is that correct? Is that how you read the current
It is,
language?
it is limiting in that it indicates department head or city clerk in a short period of time. Should that time exceed 60 days, then it is a member of council. So it is limiting at this point.
I think by default, those choices make sense. Like if the mayor were suddenly incapacitated, it makes sense to have those restrictions for department head or city clerk. But I do think that if the mayor needs to step away, it makes sense to have more flexibility there. Maybe allow other bureau chiefs or even just anyone who generally may suit the qualifications of the office of mayor. Yeah, I think a little bit more expansion would be appreciated by me.
Didn't we, I would say, didn't we discuss this in vacancies? Like if the mayor didn't we have I just remember a discussion when we discussed vacancies, how those positions would be filled.
Yeah,
Whether the mayor became, unable to serve, what would happen, it would be a vacancy.
Mm-hmm.
So is that not covered there that we're discussing this now, or we're supposed to put it under
Talking
here as
about
well?
The length of time involved.
Oh, so when we're talking about made a charter limit who's allowed to serve. We're talking about the length of time that
As the acting mayor.
as the acting mayor.
Yes.
And the vacancy didn't clarify that. Because I thought we
Vacancies if
did.
they're gone.
Right, but we talked about,
Yeah,
okay,
this is not a vacancy per se.
at this
This
point,
is like a temporary,
temporary.
is temporarily unable to fulfill the duties.
A good example would be the mayor's on vacation this week. So currently, the acting mayor, under her designation, is Director Stephen Campbell.
Right.
Okay, so she appointed him to serve in her stead if she couldn't be reached.
Right.
She's on vacation this week.
So there are going to be situations where you might need somebody to be able to serve as an acting mayor when a vacancy doesn't exist in the office. In other words, the mayor is still mayor, but
Right.
not available.
Right. Okay,
I'm comfortable with the way it's currently written.
yeah, I am too.
Is that the consensus?
Sounds
Okay. That means department heads would be eligible,
Yes.
other appointed officials eligible, the city
That-
clerk.
Now, this assumes that they are city residents.
Yeah, the city clerk, by qualification, has to be a city resident.
Yeah, but I mean, just department heads. We do not require department heads to live in the city.
That is correct.
Okay, so this would assume, this is requiring that a city, it can be a department head as long as they are a city resident.
No.
The current third-class city code provision carries on its residency requirements into the person that's designated to serve as the acting mayor. So currently, Mr. Campbell is a resident of the city of Lancaster. He is also the department head director of the Department of Public Works, so he is eligible to serve as the acting mayor. If he were not available, the mayor would potentially have some problems.
If it is your
Okay.
desire, we can include a sentence requiring residency.
Yes.
For acting mayor.
I think so. It just,
So,
you know, there's no wiggle room.
Any other elected officials?
Actually, just a clarifying question to make, because I forget. Barry, are you considered a department head?
No.
Do we think the solicitor could be?
He's an appointed official,
Okay.
right?
That's right.
You're an appointed official.
Correct, but I'm not a department head.
Right.
So right now, the only other,
this is
the way
city clerk,
the way they've come to the question, the only other eligible
city clerk.
appointed official would be the city clerk. You
Right.
could expand that to include the solicitor. Other ones that I've seen other municipalities do would be the mayor's chief of staff, if they have one, which are both the appointed positions, because of their familiarity with city affairs. But that's a choice of the commission, just offering
Yeah.
an answer to your question.
But I would be,
So
I'll let you follow your thought.
Well, no, I would be interested in including the solicitor, and if there were a chief of staff, the chief of staff.
I support
Okay.
that.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking, I saw some of the charters I read also said council members could be appointed to the mayor in her absence.
And that is
The next question.
That's the next
Oh,
one.
okay.
any elected officials eligible, that would include council or the controller.
Council or the solicitor, I think they said, right?
Councilor Controller.
Council,
He just said solicitor.
solicitor and chief
It's
of
not a
staff.
point.
No, this is elected.
Elected.
Right.
Elected ones are
Oh,
council.
then you jumped down from appointed to elected. Okay, got you. Okay.
Yeah.
So yes. Yes.
I would not vote for the controller.
Okay.
I do think the controller shouldn't be
I don't
allowed.
think the controller should serve as mayor. I really don't.
Right.
Well, I don't think a member of council should be able to serve as mayor unless they at least temporarily resign from council.
Yeah.
You can't have two elected, even if it is just for 2 weeks, they should not be serving two elected positions at the same time.
Right, and I don't think they could serve both, and I think we discussed that when we talked
Well, but,
about.
you know, any other
serve.
elected officials, that's, you know,
Right,
I feel like, I mean, just given what Barry just mentioned about, like, there's not very many options right now, that having the council members available is like the backstop of the backstop in case you don't have staff that
That's right.
live in the city.
And we don't have
Unless
staff.
unless I'm misremembering what we said were qualified for department heads. We didn't put in a
I
city
don't think we
resident
discussed that.
qualification, did we?
Oh, we haven't
We
done
didn't
that.
discuss it.
That's tonight.
That's coming.
We get there tonight.
I don't mind, I mean, regardless of how that discussion turns out, I mean, I'd like to think that we would at least have one department head who lives in the city.
Yeah.
You know, so
Yeah.
maybe we won't be able to have all of them, but we should at least expect, I mean, like to me, like, I don't mind putting the mayor in that box. You know, like, because this is a designation that's made
By the mayor.
by the mayor and it's made at the start of their,
Term.
or made as needed.
Something comes up,
Ad hoc.
Anytime, but
Right,
something would come up.
but,
it could be, you'd like to see it at the beginning of the term.
So, I mean, for example, this week, the mayor left, she designated Steve Campbell.
for this week.
And she did that before
But-
she left last week.
But it's, right, but,
And
you know,
someone could
3 months
leave.
from now, she could designate Chris Delphs.
If this
Well, she
Campbell
couldn't
person
currently,
left.
No.
but if, she couldn't currently.
Right,
They gotta be a city resident.
right.
If you do it at the beginning of the year, what if that person leaves?
Right, so you don't,
So,
Right now, it's more ad hoc. When the mayor expects a vacancy,
right.
she makes a designee. It's not a permanent appointment.
Right.
Is there a time limit on that appointment?
60 days.
60 days, is that what we said? Okay. No
Yeah, I think
longer,
It's a
no
question
longer
on
than
here.
60 days. Oh, okay, sorry,
I'm just getting there too, darling.
okay.
But to circle back to elected officials, I'm okay with council members serving as long as there's like a temporary stay of their powers of council. Like, so that, you know, it is a good backstop, I think.
Is that something we could build in?
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying, just so I'm understanding, that a member of council, irrespective of time period, could be designated by the mayor?
Designated by the mayor, but their powers as a member of council are like paused while they're under that designation. Not that they're resigning, just like they would not be an active acting member of council until they're no longer the acting mayor.
Yeah, I don't know, I'm not sure,
Because how would the majority come in?
right, like,
But when we look at the majority as a whole, I think we talked about that and had discussions about that.
I don't know, I just think
Would that person then
it
not
invites,
count as a council member, be 6 instead of 7?
I mean, this could
Isn't it
cycle back.
similar- And isn't it similar to someone holding 2 elected positions? Is that why you said the person would have to resign their,
Well, not resign, but
resign,
like, yeah, just relinquish their powers for the moment. And I think this does circle back to, I think we had talked about this at the last meeting where I think the mayor in certain circumstances should be able to break ties of council. So if there were situations where there is an even council and there are ties to break, I think this is an appropriate area where that conversation comes into play again.
I mean, during your tenure, has we had problems with making this happen?
Well, we certainly didn't while Mr. Hopkins was the Director of Administrative Services.
Okay.
So keep in mind that the third-class city code for the Director of Administrative Services says that the Director of Administrative Services is to be a city resident unless that requirement is waived by city council. Now, when he retired and Tina Campbell was appointed to replace him, she lives just outside the city and council waived that requirement. So we always had one, if not more. Currently, there is one department head that lives in the city, which is Mr. Campbell. It is a possibility that there could be a situation. And again, the acting mayor requirement, I'll say the main thing the acting mayor is doing is dealing with emergencies if they arise, because typically we're dealing with short times. As you discussed in your vacancy proceedings, the third-class city code has a vacancy of 60 days. So, I mean, anything that comes up beyond 60 days, you're going to be dealing with filling the vacancy with another position. I would also just mention that the acting mayor would not, even if they were a council member, would not be serving in the role of 2 elected officials, because the acting mayor is an appointed position. by the way you're writing it, it's appointed by the mayor. So they are holding, what you would want to say, in my opinion, if you wanted to move forward with that, is they can't receive extra compensation or compensation for serving as the acting mayor, because then they would be holding two employment positions with the city.
Okay.
I just
No, no,
Okay, are we ready to move on?
I'm fine with it. I've now changed my mind. I'm fine with it, but,
but including
Council.
including council?
Council without control.
Fine, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
so yes, moving on.
Next question deals with how long after the beginning of the mayor's term should the charter require a designee to be named? And should it occur at the beginning of the term, or should it be left to the discretion of the mayor based on circumstances?
I think it should be left to the discretion of the mayor. As
At any
need,
time.
ad hoc as needed.
Yeah, I agree.
So I would mention maybe one thing you might want to include, which is a slight modification of that. And again, we're dealing with we're dealing with a mayor who knows that something is going to happen. But you could have an instance, and again, so I'm trying to, this is not my opinion, I'm trying to give counsel on practical situations as a solicitor. So for example, and I use dire, something happened to the mayor,
Yeah.
and she's not capable, let's say she's unconscious,
Like comatose.
unable to make a designation. So I think you may want to think about having a designee that she has in place unless she elects somebody else to, on a periodic basis.
Because that's kind of where I was getting.
Or adding language of, in the instance that the mayor has not appointed anybody to serve, then, and that's how I would probably suggest it.
Okay.
So that there's a roadmap. In other words, something happens, then, okay, is it going to be that, one of the members who would have been appointed, who's a director,
Almost like a
serve?
line of succession
Yeah.
for temporary.
Do you want to create similar, and that's all I'm asking you to think about here, not that I want to throw any monkey wrench into it, but there is one possibility that is plausible that isn't covered by what you've dealt with so far.
I was going to say, I think I like the way you described it the first time, where it's the mayor designates who that person would be in the case that they're unable to
Right.
make that decision, or they choose somebody else.
Are you saying at the beginning of their term,
Yeah,
already have a designee?
yeah, but that they can use, that's only to be used if they're unable to make a decision, but that,
Right.
throughout their term, they could choose somebody else.
If there's somebody who
I
generally
don't
is
know how you
always.
would write that, but Barry said it
Right,
in a way that
Yeah.
made sense to me.
I agree with that.
And I think I've read in, I think maybe it's Allentown, I'm not sure, or in their charter where they said the mayor had a year, and if she became unable to before that term, like before that year was up, something, I forget the language, but I just read it today, that she would, they would lose, I guess she would lose her position or something if it happened before a year. And I think that is in one of the charters, and maybe you can help me out where that is, but that is in one of the charters, that she would have a year, because if she only serves, what if she only serves 60 days and something happens?
So are you
So
saying
we
it's a
should
limit?
designate what would happen in a situation if the mayor served 60 days and something happened. Does it become a vacancy then, or has she designated someone so that person takes over for the next 60 days till it becomes a vacancy?
I think that was covered in the vacancy part. but-
I'm just asking, is it a vacancy?
Right.
The deputy only serves for 60 days.
Right.
Under the code right now, you could change that.
Maximum.
Right,
But the deputy is only serving for 60 days.
Yeah.
At which
and I
point,
think it should be a little less. I would go with 30 days.
30 days from the beginning of the term?
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
30
Okay,
days?
30 days.
30 days.
So, yeah.
And I know what Barry was saying, because we had Mayor Gray when he was in that accident. I remember the city was like, who's going to take over as mayor? And it was a real back and forth thing when he was in his motorcycle accident. But thank God, he did survive. But I know it was a lot of questioning about, wow, now what happens?
So there was no designee at the time?
I'm not sure. I think we followed
he
the
was
code.
He was capable of making
Yes,
designations.
still making,
Even though he was injured.
injured, right, right.
And so he did not serve for a period of time and designated some people.
Right.
It actually wasn't that long because he
Right.
was able to serve.
Yes.
So, just because I don't know if we specifically addressed this part, but like if the mayor doesn't make a designation, I would feel okay with like the final stopgap being like if a temporary stay where the president of council acts as mayor, because we know that that's going to be a resident of city council. I'm sorry, of the city. And it is temporary, just to get things sorted in the event that the mayor does not happen to make a designation prior to that point.
I'm fine with that.
And I'm curious, Ms. Bird, why do you say 30 instead of 60? Because I was thinking more of 60 days.
Well, I'm just thinking she's not going to be able to stay for 30 days, I mean, that's reasonable. We're talking about ad hoc, so it's I'm going away or, I'm unavailable, I'm sick, 30 days is...
30
anything
days is
that's
not a
a
long
deal.
time. 30 days is a very, very short time. In the machinations of the way things move, 30 days is between lunch and dinner, I sort of agree with Ms. Cook that I'm thinking, 60 days seems reasonable.
No
30
more than-
We're just to make sure I'm straight. We have two questions that we seem to be talking about at the same time.
Yeah.
Go
One
back and
is, how soon after the beginning of their term do they have to designate somebody?
Yeah.
And also,
How long can they serve?
how long, right? I mean, am I right about that?
Yeah, exactly right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So,
We're only
Okay, so
asking,
let's take one at a time, please.
at the beginning of the term, how long does the mayor have to designate someone at the beginning of the term? And we're saying 30 days, that's what I heard,
30 days or 60 days, which you,
or 60.
Like, for this, like, I think
30 days?
30 days seems fine.
30, yeah.
It's-
Yeah, this should be a pretty straightforward decision.
Yeah, when you're setting up.
Identify a
And
designee.
with the ability to
I mean,
That
I
one,
mean-
yes.
name some,
okay, let me ask, what's, for a new mayor, hiring their administration, do appointed officials,
House.
how does that, remind me how that timeline goes?
So, the way it typically works is a director or department head serves at the pleasure of the mayor, serves during the duration of the mayor's term or until they're replaced. What I can tell you is the mayor takes office typically the first week of January, and at that meeting, there are resolutions to appoint
Exactly.
all of the department heads, whether they be the existing ones who
Right. Yeah.
he or she is asked to stay, or whether they're new ones.
Okay, so
30 days.
30 days is enough time. 30 days doesn't risk those people not being in place. Okay,
Now,
30 days.
and particularly since you're allowing the ad hoc, which is something comes up, the mayor can appoint for that short period of time.
Right.
So how long at the beginning of the mayor's term?
30.
30 days.
30 days.
Mhm.
your second question then, John.
Skips one question and moves down.
And that's where, wait, oh, right.
How long can the acting mayor assume the role?
I think 60 days is an appropriate amount of time, especially because we could be talking about medical situations like an accident or otherwise. And I would be interested in seeing that timeline able to be extended so long as council approves that.
I'm fine with that.
So we're saying 60 days, subject to an extension by council?
Yes.
Okay.
Sixty?
Okay,
Yeah, we skipped one,
right.
notification.
Backing up one. Required notification to council and the city clerk by the mayor, or if the mayor is incapacitated and unable to provide notification, then the acting mayor should provide notification of the designation within X number of days.
All right.
So can you
I think he went up.
ask us that question a different way, please?
I'm sorry.
Can you ask us that? What are we trying to answer? Like what's,
How long?
I'm not sure I'm following the question.
That council is to be notified by the mayor of the designation.
Which one?
Anyone, either at the beginning
Oh,
of
okay.
the term, either at the beginning of the term or at a point during the year.
What's the current requirement?
There is, to my knowledge,
There isn't
there is
one?
none. There is no
Yeah,
notification.
This is essentially, you can't have a letter in your desk that's designates somebody without council knowing it. Once the designation is made, the council has to be informed. It can't be.
Like, oops, surprise, they made a designation, like, inform them
Yeah,
as soon as
I mean,
possible.
it's a formal declaration to the council, here's who is going to replace me if I go away.
Right.
So it's housekeeping, you're keeping the
But this is
council in
not
the
the
loop.
ad hoc, this
Yeah,
is just
keeping the council in the loop.
Right.
if it's
So,
60 days or
Like
more.
Yeah.
7 days, is that?
Same thing.
Yeah, it seems fine with me.
Five days.
I don't know what the downside is.
You're just basically saying,
It's a notification.
once you designate somebody, you have to,
Once
tell council.
yeah, once the mayor signs that letter saying I designate, someone has to tell council.
Right
Seven-
away.
It can't be
What if
hidden.
it's the
Yeah,
president of council?
Yeah, 7 days,
Wait.
3 days, I don't know.
7 days.
I know, I'm like, I
That-
don't know.
what do you-
what to
Give 'em a
say.
Is there a reason?
We just,
Why
we
would it
require
take a week?
notification?
I think all you have to do is require notification. So the mayor has to notify staff in order for the acting mayor to actually be able to serve. So I think whenever she makes a designation, she should be required to notify staff and city council. And I don't think you have to put a time frame in.
Okay, that's where I was confused,
Oh,
just like,
Okay,
Do it.
You just have to do it.
you just have to do it.
okay, great.
Yeah, that's fine.
Well, no, we're just going to require notification.
No days.
Don't over legislate.
Don't put too many dates in.
Because I would just say, like, if the mayor's gonna make the designation, they're gonna let their staff know. If they don't let council know, there's a problem there,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So we're going to require them to tell council.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, who shall be appointed acting mayor following the time limit set by the charter? A council member, another eligible person.
I don't understand the question.
Yeah. I'm
Now this is the 60 day,
lost.
now we're to the 60-day,
The 60
61st day thing.
Time period, correct.
It's going to the second paragraph.
Oh.
Yeah, the 60 days.
414.
I think this is where the conversation about having an automatic, like the president of council would assume that role for this time period conversation goes.
Well, the paragraph, the second paragraph of section 414 on top is the current code provision. So if you want to review
Where,
that,
where it says a member of
a
council.
member of council.
And I think what Mr. Dasher is saying, he wants specifically, yes, a member of council, but specifically the president of council.
I kind of like a member of council. I mean, they're not every, I mean, because you also want somebody who has capacity and flexibility, which may or may not be true, equally true. You know, you want somebody who's,
Right. I guess I
You
make
wanna
the,
take the
I mean, it could, that doesn't preclude it from being the president of council.
Right.
But
Right.
it allows for it to be, for council to agree on another member of council.
And the way
At
it's,
least they're a city resident. Any member of council. can be a
yes,
city
but
resident.
it also, the way it's currently written, council would be the one to pick that person. So
Right.
council could decide, you know, the issue of president may be questions of party and so on. Well, if the president is of a different party than the mayor, then the majority of council is going to be a different party of the mayor, and the majority of council most likely will appoint somebody of their party to be the acting mayor. At least
Right.
if I were that on council, that's what I would do. I mean, that's just the way politics works.
I also feel
Um,
like the president of council has more duties. So do we really want to take them away from those duties? I mean, maybe they want to, but do we want to force it? You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
Whereas we just say member of council, any of the members could do it.
okay.
And it could be the president. That's where I was
Yeah, no,
thinking with that.
all this logic makes sense to me. I was just saying I was ironically thinking president and council because they have more duties, and that like this would be one of them, like whomever council decides is the president. There's an understanding that they would have these emergency duties if needed. But I track the logic that you've all said.
So
So it seems like we could leave that second paragraph.
that's the consensus, is keep
As
the
is.
code?
So we'll keep it at a member of council. Finally, at what point has the mayor forfeited the office? And if we go to the mayor's section, there are some specific provisions that we talked about that deal with forfeiture of office. I can go over those if you would like.
Please.
If at any time during their term of office, they do not fulfill the qualification or requirements for the office established by the charter, deals with residency related issues, violates any express prohibition of the charter, following action by the Court of Common Pleas that found the mayor incompetent or incapable of conducting their own affairs. I think that goes to a great extent to the point of when they forfeit office, has been convicted of any crime classified as a misdemeanor, the second class or higher, under the laws of the Commonwealth or the United States, or be convicted of any comparable crime under the laws of any other state, commits malfeasance in office, what shall be defined as an unlawful official act committed willfully, commits misfeasance in office, which is defined as the fulfillment of a statutory imposed duty in an unlawful or improper manner. Those are the criteria for forfeiture of office. I think as we're talking about this particular section, we could refer to the requirements of forfeiture of office.
I have a question. Can you all hear me? Okay. When we talked about being convicted of a crime, did we clarify that it is at the time of
Yes,
their?
we did.
At the
We
time.
did.
Okay,
During the
Yes.
term
We
of their
did.
office.
yes.
During the term.
Okay, yes. Just wanted to clarify that, to be sure.
At what point after 60 days?
So are we saying 61 days?
Right.
If we're giving them 60 days?
The question that's really being posed to you is, if I understand where you've gone so far, is right now, the acting mayor can serve for up to 60 days unless that time frame is extended by city council. Do you want to put, there's a hole there, right? Now, at 60 days, are we going to say that if the mayor is no longer serving, for whatever reason, is their office vacant, or is it
Yep.
60 days plus the extension? That's what this question is getting at, is do you want to confirm that actually not serving and being unable to serve on a temporary basis becomes a vacation after a set period of time, which under the current code would probably be interpreted at 60 days.
I'd say
So the way that I'm understanding the second paragraph of section 414 is after 60 days, a member of council can be appointed as acting mayor. But it doesn't give a time frame. So this is what we're trying to describe, right?
Correct, beyond the 60 days.
At what point is the mayor no longer the mayor?
Yeah.
At what point is he forfeited?
Their
Forfeited the office?
61.
By vacancy, by absence rather.
But we have,
We don't have that in
We
what
do not
Fred
have-
just
Well,
read.
no,
So,
right.
I mean, I don't know, I'm just gonna throw out a number and just say 90 days. If they're like not available for 90 days, we've had 60 days with the appointed person and 60 days with a member of council, and the mayor is still not come back to work, that's when they forfeited their office. I'm just throwing something out there.
That's 120.
Oh,
I
sorry.
think that's
Yeah.
long.
I'm just clarifying that.
Thank you.
That's a long time.
Just
Thank
clarifying.
you.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, whatever number that is, that's what I was going at.
Okay,
Like
So
180 is half a year.
I think that's
90,
too long.
60,
That's too
whatever.
long.
I think it's too long.
Okay.
Yeah, whatever.
I mean,
Yeah.
6 months is too long.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're still talking about the amount of time, but I think 6 months is too long.
120 would be 4 months.
I'm comfortable with 120 as a
60 for the council person, and
Right.
60 for the deputy mayor. So you've got 120 days without a mayor.
right.
By the mayor's
And
action,
then our vacancy regulations kick in.
yes.
Is that correct?
Right.
Yeah.
'cause you're
So we have
forfeited.
120 days and then the
office is
vacancy.
Forfeited.
Council declares it vacant.
At which point, then you would have your 45-day period to
Period
fill the
to-
vacancy.
So then we'd have another 45 days, so I think 120 is too
But if
long.
there's an
So
injury,
90 days?
Maybe 90.
Oh, but if there's an injury?
no, I didn't mean to interrupt you. The council could always extend it.
And Barry,
Oh,
what you
okay.
said is the 45 days that council then has after that,
Correct.
After
based
that.
on the language in the
Because
vacancy.
the forfeiture, there's no vacancy until
Right.
whatever time period you select here expires.
Okay,
So if you're saying it's 90 days, at the 90 days, now there's a vacancy,
They gotta
and
still
council
have
starts the
45
vacancy
days.
process of 45 days to
Yeah.
fill.
Then
And
we'd have
what-
45.
Jerry just said is unless council extends the amount of time that somebody
You've
could be
indicated.
the
Yeah, the
acting
acting mayor,
mayor.
if it's an
Could be
injury,
extended by council.
Right,
and nobody on council wants to step up to be the mayor, that 60 days could be extended. So
okay,
you're being flexible.
But if
Okay,
it's
yeah.
not extended, then this provision
okay,
would
that's
kick in.
fine. That's what I wanted to make sure that we weren't like making it too rigid.
Right, so how many days?
I think we said 90. Do you, do you
Yeah,
care?
I
You have a
mean-
strong opinion?
The only reason I want to be flexible about it is not for like those ad hoc, oh, I know I'm going to be out of town situations. It's like, admittedly, one of my biggest fears as an Uber driver isn't my passengers, it's getting in a car crash. So that's why I just want more flexibility, because if the council feels like they want to let the mayor recover, I
Yeah.
do want to allow more time for that. But that's the only reason I'm like wibble wobbly about it.
Well, I feel like what Jerry was saying allows for that.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you have a council who doesn't like the mayor.
Right,
They're
and
gonna be-
that's what I was gonna say, and I think, our chairman brought it up earlier in discussing, what if they're not of the same party?
Yeah.
Then this is something that council could vote to continue to let happen till when?
Yeah, you have to rely
So I
on like
think we
the
need,
good faith of it.
a deadline, I think we should put a deadline in there. Whether it's, I don't think
The
council.
council
should be
can
able to
only
keep-
extend it so much?
Yeah.
or-
I don't think
You have all the
should have-
flexibility here because you guys are drafting the Constitution.
Right, so I don't
right?
think
Right.
council
So-
should continue to extend it, like council shouldn't be able to say, well, we'll extend it for another 6 months.
So I'll give you an example of how the language might work, just as with numbers, you guys play with the numbers. But you were talking about 90. So at the expiration of 90 days, the office would be deemed vacant unless city council chooses to extend that period for a time frame not to exceed a total of, and I'll throw out an example, 120 days. So that'd be one more month, or 180 days, which would be 2 more months, which means the maximum council could extend it would be up to that 6-month period or 4-month period or 5-month period if you want to split the difference.
Gotcha.
Do you have an opinion on that?
I will say, I think going beyond half a year is way too long. Like, if the mayor needs that much recovery, there should be a vacancy. I genuinely think 4 months is okay, because that also plays into the level of age. Like, people recover at different rates, and I do understand there's politics involved. It kind of comes to the good faith of people and how they feel about however they feel about the mayor. Like, if the mayor gets into an accident, the mayor gets into an accident. If council decides against that, council decides against that.
I would say I agree with that. Keep in mind that it works the other way as well.
Yes.
That you could have a change in council in the middle of that term, and the new council decides they refuse to extend it.
Right.
Just for the reason that to force a vacancy.
Right.
It goes the other way goes, and reality is, that's the way politics are done. I mean, and we, as a nonpartisan board, we're trying to keep politics out of a very political process.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, that's what happens. The speaker of the House is very close to the White House, and whether they're in the same party or not, and we just accept that.
Yeah.
I'm willing to accept that. Yeah.
I'd say.
I don't want to force city council to do things like, well, they can only appoint a member of council who is of the party of the, no.
No, no one would say that, yeah. I'd say 90 days. I think you said
That's too
4
short.
months, right? I'm saying 3 months.
And we're still talking about at what point has the mayor forfeited?
Because then we still got 45 days after the 90
After that.
days, so you're still up to that 120,
This is
So,
the acting mayor.
right? So I would say 90 days.
I'm sticking with the
Sticking with
4-month
Tony.
limit.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Let's go on.
4 months. 4 months.
120 days.
120?
Yeah.
120?
120, so they can extend it up to 120 days. After that, a member of council, the 60-day
That-
thing.
Your vacancy.
That's when it's forfeited.
Yeah, that's when it's forfeited.
That's when it's forfeited,
Yeah,
right?
then the vacancy process kicks in, because that way you've resolved the situation within half a year.
Yes.
So there is no council.
Because there's 45 days.
Yeah.
They're saying if the council extends it 120 days, there's no possibility for the second paragraph to come in. It goes to forfeiture.
Forfeiture.
That's what I'm hearing,
Okay,
Right.
yeah, okay,
okay?
right.
So,
120 days maximum.
You're thinking.
right, so that
I'm
covers the
thinking,
Yeah.
the
have
60.
full understanding of what we
60.
just decided when I said
This whole
the
process
language.
can be.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's what I I'm not feeling it, but let me see it in writing.
Yeah, let's just sort of leave it,
Yeah, well,
as we say all along, we can
Yes, I do.
come back.
but
I
this
do.
whole
And we
process,
spent 30 seconds on
Okay.
something that will happen next
whole
week.
process, don't worry.
Okay. If we
I'm
move
sorry,
to
hold on
the,
1 second. Are we saying 120 days and then the 45 days afterwards? Is that what we're saying?
That's what we just
120, it becomes
45
the fourth.
Because I'm hearing, am I hearing 90 days?
She asked me a question about the 90 days. At what
Okay.
point has the mayor forfeited the office?
Uh-huh.
Okay?
That was 120.
That's
Yes.
120.
days.
Right, that's what they said.
That's what was
Correct.
the consensus that we heard. And
Right.
at that point, the office is vacant, and then the provisions of the vacancy, the 45 days.
Right.
come into play.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, moving to the city business administrator. The optional Plan A allows for the creation of a Department of Administration and requires the head of that department be appointed by the mayor and confirmed by council. There are qualifications listed in the law for the business administrator position, and you've titled that the Director of Administrative Services under the current organizational chart of the city. Section 416 of the third-class city code states the position shall be chosen solely on the basis of their executive and administrative qualifications with special reference to their actual experience in or their knowledge of accepted practices in respect to the office duties of the office as hereinafter set forth. At the time of appointment, they need not be a resident of the city or state, but during the tenure of office, they may reside outside the city only with the approval of council. And I believe that's the action that Barry had mentioned with the current individual. The director shall have, exercise, and discharge the functions, powers, and duties of the department. The department, under the direction and supervision of the mayor, shall, 1, assist in the preparation of the budget, 2, administer a centralized purchasing system, and 3, perform such other duties as council may prescribe. First question is, should there be a Department of Administration headed by a business administrator?
Yes.
Yes.
And the business administrator is appointed by the mayor with the approval of council.
Yes.
Now, any qualifications for the position, and I outlined a little bit earlier, they're very broad, current qualifications under the code.
Well, I would have one, if we're using language pretty closely, at the time of appointment, they need not be a resident of the city or state, but during his tenure of office, they may reside, that part, I would prefer to see that flipped around, make it a more proactive, just a statement. at the time of appointment, they should be a resident of the city, but the city council may approve, taking that away, kind of make the impetus go the other direction. It sort of implies that, it says, to me, it says the exact same thing. It just implies that the mayor would be trying to get a
Yeah,
resident.
the reason for that language is that if you hire somebody that's not in the city, they can't be here at the time. They may not have moved here at the time of the
Yeah.
appointment. So the language tracks, which is,
Oh, at the time of appointment. Okay, I
Correct.
follow that, yes. Like I said, legalese means nothing to me.
We deal with numbers, bro.
Yeah, write this,
And
write
letters
this,
that act as numbers, I get it.
write this in numbers and equations, and I'll follow it, yes.
I don't understand the specific qualifications, the way they're written. I don't even know what that means.
They're very broad at this point.
Yes, they
Yeah.
are.
Yeah,
The General Assembly wanted it to be very broad.
Yeah.
You can make it more
you can make it, right, you could make it more specific.
they were left broad by the General Assembly for a number of reasons. One, to leave the elected officials the ability to determine what qualifications for that position were necessary. Two, the charters nor the third-class city code or optional charter laws specify what all of the functions of the administrative services will be. So, for example, here in the city, as you recall, Department of Administrative Services includes Information and Technology Services, human resources, accounting, treasury, grants. Now, you are not likely to find an expert in all five.
Yeah,
So
that's
if you,
why the executive and administrative qualities are highlighted.
correct.
Okay.
And that was, when you track how the optional charter law was built, it was built adding that Department of Business Administration with the concept that a municipality that went to that provision had more financial resources and other resources that needed executive leadership and management.
So why do they call out the 1, 2, 3? After you described all those things, why do they call out these, assists in the preparation of the budget makes sense, performs other duties as council makes sense. Why do they stick in this centralized purchasing system?
The reason that's placed there is to assure that there is one place in the city that controls that the purchasing is done in accordance with Pennsylvania law and federal law. And a centralized purchasing system also implies that most cities of our size, third-class cities, have multiple departments. As you've seen in the budget process, each department ends up with a budget. If they're all doing procurement, it's kind of like there's no one watching over the hen house.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Okay. I just didn't understand why it was called out like that.
Sure.
So it makes sense to me.
Trying to explain the best I can, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
I would say most of the charters that I read do get a little more specific and say procurement and have procedures and policies in that and use that language actually in their charter when they're identifying what the responsibility of the business administrator is. Most of the charters break that down more than just three areas, preparation of the budget and everything that I've read. I think they're a little bit more detailed, and I would think that we would want to do that. I know we keep continuing to say, let's keep everything really broad, but I think broad might be what got us to this deficit that we're facing now. I think one of the things we need to do is look at tightening some things up or having some more control to say, let's see where we're going. I just think, I can give some language. I have some other language that I'm going to send out. I was going to do it on the other business, but I will, I can say what charter it was. I highlighted it and send out some of that language that they use. I also think about the residing within the city. I know that Tina does not live in the city, and that's fine, but I think we should say within 5 miles, within 10 miles of the city. I don't want somebody living in Washington, D.C. being appointed to be our business administrator. I think we need to narrow that gap down and say they got to live within 5 or 10 miles from the city. We don't have to say they must live in the city, but I think we should require them to live within a distance of the city, and I'm open for how far that should be.
So the current director lives within 25 feet of the city, but not in the city.
Right, but, I was thinking more miles, but
Yeah,
yes.
I know.
But
I
that's.
mean, she really does.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
So, but but that would help in, not saying she's required to live in the city because like you said, she lives 25 feet. So I think we should put a mileage on that because now with technology and even though we're going back to people being in the office and we have everyone working out of the office, I don't want somebody being the business administrator that's not even living close to the city.
If you give us some, the language you're talking about, Ms. Bird, we can put that in for discussion when we write
Okay.
the article.
That will be.
It is possible, too, to keep the charter language on the broad side and then put more specificity in an administrative code.
Okay.
So we're saying keep the qualifications listed in the charter as, for the code, those, as we said, for example, executive administrative qualifications, and then when it's drafted, you can see how it looks. And then if you want to add some, or this Bird gets us some stuff from the other charters, we could all debate that. Is that fair
Yes.
enough?
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay.
I like where your head's at on that.
Okay. And finally, dealing with other department heads. The optional Plan A allows the creation of up to 9 departments, but does not specify those departments aside from the business administrator position. Should other specific department heads be included in the charter? They can be, but they don't need to be.
I thought we had a discussion and said, maybe I was just thinking about the engineering position, but I guess that was an appointed position, so
Right.
forget that,
We
that
did
was
not
not
include
a
that. That's
department
correct.
head.
So these are public works, fire, police, public safety, that kind of stuff.
Right now, does the chief of police and the fire chief, aren't they supposed to report to a director of public safety?
We don't have that.
But we don't have one?
We had one years ago. We had a public safety position.
Why?
So the third-class city, this is where the third-class city code and the optional charter law are not identical. The optional charter law, Plan A, supersedes provisions of the third-class city code that are inconsistent. Before the city moved to an optional charter, you were mandated to have these departments, and presumptively council served as kind of their supervisors. Under the optional charter, you can elect to have whatever departments you want. The one that is included in the charter in the code by specific reference is the Department of Administrative Services or Business Administrator. So you can have, and currently the city structure is, there's a department, there's a Bureau of Police, a Bureau of Fire, which we treat as essentially departments, and 2 separate chiefs running each of those. They report directly to the mayor under our current structure, just like Director of Public Works does, and just like the Director of Community Planning and Economic Development does.
And again, the question is whether you want to specify other departments specifically in the charter or not.
I do not.
And if you don't, then it's the mayor can create departments and the council approval.
Up to 9.
Well, up to 9 in the code, but in the charter, you'd have to put that limit. Right now, there would be no limit.
Right, but we would say over 95. I would say a couple things. I think about the public safety position, and I really think back about the George Floyd incident when a lot of things were going on within the city. It would have been really good to have a public safety department to speak. I mean, I really felt like we put the mayor in a position to speak, and if some of the things shouldn't have came from her. They should have came from the public safety position. I mean, we had several conversations from the community with the mayor about that position, and the need for it. And I can see when things were up, it would be good to have a department to go to and not just necessarily put all that under the mayor for questionings, but a department that's really addressing it. Because when we look at it and the things that were to be addressed, some of the things that were said were not addressed. Whereas if we had a department over public safety, the accountability could have been held there.
So I've often thought that there should be a degree of separation between the mayor and the chief of police.
Yep.
It creates as Ms. Bird said, it creates almost a conflict. And I'm just wondering if there's a way to separate that. The mayor would have to fire the chief of police, which now becomes a very political issue. And like I said, I was wondering why we don't have a Department of Public Safety of which the mayor would appoint the head of public safety, who then would appoint chiefs of police, chief of fire, chief of police, and so on. But
Yeah, I mean, appointment of the chiefs of police and chiefs of fire get into a couple different things. One, they're typically mayoral appointments. They can be civil service positions if you're hiring from within. They are not currently civil service positions. We exclude them out purposefully, because otherwise then they would be part of the bargaining unit, and then you can't have those sorts of things. The other thing I would say is ultimately, most codes, if you look at the borough code, third-class city code, county codes, et cetera, in almost all versions, the mayor is ultimately directly responsible for public safety. And Mr. Adams, to your point, that's not an actual conflict. That's actually designed by the legislature to assure that the highest elected official is actually responsible for the one service that most citizens deem to be the most important, and is therefore involved in it. Inserting somebody else wouldn't necessarily change who's ultimately responsible for hiring and firing, so I'm not sure it would really provide the buffer, because the department head would be serving at the pleasure of the mayor anyway. Just that I'm giving points and counterpoints, and the other thing is you're adding an executive to your city staff, mandating now another executive that would have to presumptively be paid based on payment compression schedules. Our chief of police and chief of fire are fairly highly paid officials. So just thinking these are points and counterpoints, no one view one way or the other, but just about every code, and that's not inconsistent with other states, actually. It's one of the few places that Pennsylvania is actually consistent with other states, is that in most municipalities, the highest elected official is ultimately directly responsible for public safety.
So I'm just wondering about and maybe this is an administrative code thing, and I'm off the wrong end, as the inclusion of EMS.
Right.
When the third-class charter was written, EMS consisted of, quite literally in the 50s, the undertaker had a station wagon, and when somebody needed an ambulance, they threw him in the back of the undertaker's car, and he rushed him to the hospital. And EMS is therefore, since then, a new thing. And if we have fire, we have police, maybe we need to address EMS, even though right now it's a private service.
Well, I was going to say, if your charter allows for the expansion of departments, you already have. In most places where EMS is added as a municipal service, it's under the Fire Bureau. It's usually in combination. They get cross-trained to be both firefighters and EMS. A good example of that would be Frederick, Maryland. There's other municipalities that are doing it well. And in fact, our firefighters get trained in a lot of similar EMS fundamentals, while not necessarily being mandated to have EMS training. They do get that as part of their fire academy. They actually have to pass a portion of their test at the fire academy is on EMS.
Sure. Okay.
But yeah, to the core question, I mean, I agree. I think I want the mayor in as close as possible to the public safety functions, and adding a layer in between creates the opportunity for the mayor to sort of evade. Yeah. Right. I think that I don't know. That's how I see that.
So what would the broad language be?
The broad language could be very similar to what is in section 414 right now, where you would have the ability to create up to X number of departments. That the mayor would have that authorization, subject to council action to confirm.
So police, if you consider police a part of police.
Or no number.
Or no number.
Yeah.
Yeah, or no, no.
Have to limit
Because
it.
remember, the creation of a department involves budget. It involves the budget process, the mayor's, council, everybody has to pay for it.
Right.
So there's-
I'm always wary of putting limitations on something like that because I have no idea what department is going to be needed 50 years from now.
Yeah, I agree with getting rid of the limitation. I see local government as like the perfect place for people to innovate with the functions of government, and I'd hate to see a future where like we've maxed out the departments, but there's suddenly a seen need.
Or we couldn't combine two. We suddenly say, oh, well, we've moved to a world where this and this are so similar. We're just combining those two departments and getting rid of two separate functions, but we've required it. So now we keep something that just has outlived its usefulness and let 50 years from people from now decide what departments we need or don't need or.
I mean, I think we could, that could always be changed. If we said 9 and we needed 10 or we needed 7, that's something that could be changed. I don't.
I'm just saying, why even have a number?
I think we do need to have a number for the perfect reason. We was just sitting here because of the financial situation we're in, and yet we created another department. We created the Department of Neighborhood Engagement, and no one's saying it's not needed, and nobody's saying it's not wanted. I'm looking at the finances.
Right.
At the time the budget came out, it was over $1 million in the budget for that. So now we're going to put in the charter, you can have an unlimited number of departments, and a department's going to come up. No, I think we need to be able to put a cut on that and a cap. Maybe they have to combine departments to get the end result that they want. But I don't think we should leave an open blanket for them to say, for the administration to say how many departments we're going to have. Because like we keep hearing, that comes with a dollar sign.
I would,
Council has to
The oversight is council and the budget process.
that I would agree with you if council didn't approve the departments, but because there's the check and balance in the process, I agree with not having a
Yeah.
limitation.
It's by ordinance, it says by ordinance, the council would establish the department's by ordinance.
If the council comes along one day and decides we don't need Department of such and such, it doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, the mayor sometimes, like, people will talk to me about the Department of Neighborhood Engagement. Some love it, some hate it. But like, what I think people sometimes don't realize, like, I actually went to council one day and was like, we need to legitimize this department, and it's only through that power. So I generally agree with your principle, but because we have the check and balance of council, I think it's okay to not have a limitation.
What you see?
If we put,
Just a comment and an observation to your point, Ms. Byrd. Yes, community engagement or neighborhood engagement. It's a beneficial
Yeah,
service to the
I
community.
agree.
But in general, seeing it as, seeing that we added this department, then we added some raises over some time, it just caused the question to me, how was this budgeted in and how did we go over?
Mhm.
And did city council approve that and we considered that our oversight or our checks and balances, and it still occurred?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
And I would say, and just thinking, and it may be something where we can put in the language somewhere about creating a department, because we are now requiring a capital campaign report or seeing things down in the future, that any departments would have to be put into that budget that we see forehand. Because just saying that they can create any department at any time, and like what Commissioner Cook said, it happened, and whether the checks and balance existed or worked or didn't work, we're sitting here at the table today.
Right.
Here's the devil's advocate. So we hit our limit on departments, so we're going to create, instead of a Department of Hoverboard Management 100 years from now, we're going to create the Office of Hoverboard
There you
Management.
go.
And it's not really a department, so we don't have to worry about it. We just sidestep city council too. Because council only approves departments, and we start playing name games and say, well, they report to this person, but do they really? And, I'm just worried about putting too much restriction on something that somebody will try to finagle an end run around in the long run.
And you know what, my point in saying that is not in putting a restriction, but more so, how did those checks and balances not catch this deficit that we're running into?
And I guess, and that's where I think some of the work that we've done around the annual budgeting process, I mean, we can't promise that it's going to solve that, but we've at least put ourselves in a better situation for the future. You know, so where instead of a very compressed process that happens, you know, in 1 month, we've created a lot more time and put other.
And I guess I would argue that the deficit is not necessarily because a department was created.
And
It's
I wasn't on those lines, I'm just saying.
There's like expenses
more than
related
that.
to humans who service, who are the staff members who provide the service
Same.
to the citizens. So, yeah, I just want to
Yeah.
make
I
sure that
wasn't-
we weren't,
Yeah, I
we
wasn't
weren't
insinuating that
unnecessarily
it's a department.
conflating.
I'm just
Right.
saying, you know, we're creating these things, and is it within our realm of
We
budget?
just keep saying the checks and balances. I need to see that work out, and I don't. But I do want to say, and I looked over the charters, and do most of the charters require a number of departments? Because I think 9 was the magic number from the ones that I looked at, and I saw most of them said 9 departments.
I'd have to look.
Okay.
I don't know offhand. My gut is that there's not as many restrictions, but I'd have to look.
The
Yeah,
9
I
is a code provision.
9 is from the code.
Right.
So if they're trying to mimic the code.
Code, that's probably why they said 9, because
That's a
that's
code
what the
provision.
code
That's what the code
said.
is. Yeah,
Right.
current
Language could be written broad, something along the lines that as deemed appropriate with the establishment of an ordinance by council, something along those lines.
as appropriate and necessary, something that gives it a little bit more, you have to examine why we're doing this. You know, you could say creation.
I'd be okay
when
with that.
appropriate and when necessary,
Right.
you know,
I don't think we need a number, but I'd be okay with some kind of
some kind
language
of
that
Okay.
makes council have to think a little bit harder and explain themselves.
I would agree with that.
when appropriate and when necessary. So it gives a kind of a good test.
Okay. Finally, under appointment and removal of department heads, again, the optional plan allows the appointment headed by the mayor, confirmed by council, and then the ability to have the department head serve during the term of office of the mayor until the appointment or qualification of his successor, and no member of city council shall head a department. Should the mayor appoint and council consent to the appointment of department heads? Do you want, that is the current practice. Do you want to continue that practice?
Yes,
Sound good?
I think,
Yes.
yes,
It has both branches involved.
yep, right. That's what we want. Right.
And then the removal on the last page, the mayor may remove any department head. Department head must be notified and allowed a hearing on the removal. The mayor must notify council, and following that notice, there is a 20-day period before removal is final. Should the mayor have the authority to remove a department head subject to that provision?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Why 20 days? Why can't you just remove, you can have a hearing, but, don't come to work tomorrow.
Well, the purpose of the hearing is that's given, if you choose, you want to give
Yeah.
the department head opportunity to convince council and or the mayor that that department head's job should not be lost, then that's where that process, there's a hearing after termination doesn't really solve anything. What are you doing a hearing for?
Oh,
It can be suspended, somebody
Right,
appointed
I
to
mean,
do the job.
what they would
20 days.
typically do there if you were following the procedure of 20 days and you didn't want the person serving, is they would be placed on paid admin leave pending the completion of the hearing from an HR standpoint.
That sounds
So,
logical,
Yeah.
reasonable.
Okay.
And Are there any other stipulations if someone needs to be removed, if a department head needs to be removed from an office? Are there other extenuating circumstances that need to have this language to be different? So for example, committing a crime, if a department head commits a crime and that's what they're being removed for.
I don't know that you need to specify that. I mean, the mayor, this language gives the mayor the authority to remove
At her discretion.
at her discretion. Typically, department heads serve at the discretion of the mayor. So the mayor has the ability to dismiss.
Thank you for that.
Keep in mind that department heads would be required to comply with city human resources policies, just like all other employees. So-
Oh, yeah, but then there are those that do not.
That's
So
phone buzzing.
those are the ones that do
Is
not.
Peter still
comply.
here?
Those people
Yeah,
that do not comply.
he's on.
Well,
Okay.
there's people at all levels, but then they're subject to discipline. It's not an automatic termination.
Oh, right, right.
That's the point I'm making, is they're all required to comply, and then, the process moves from there as to whether there is or isn't.
So did we discuss whether department heads should be city residents? I know we talked about the administrator, but, I'm a strong one that believes the one that's getting the top dollar from the taxpayer should be required to live in the city. On the other charters, most of the language I looked at gave them with a year within being appointed, they would move into the city, so they don't have to be living in the city at time of appointment, but the expectation is that they will move into the city.
I would be okay with that, but I have heard from some members of the public arguments against that, so I'm curious how everyone else feels. Normally goes down to like talent, like just not being able to find, but it is interesting to be like, okay, we can appoint someone, but so long as within a certain period of time they move into the city, I think I'd be okay with that.
You could use similar language as what we talked about under the business administrator position. You could include that as a requirement for department heads.
Unless waived by council.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, I kind of like, to me that, I agree. I would prefer that as many department heads as possible live in the city.
Yeah.
But, it's not as easy, it may not be as easy.
And I can speak to the occasion because I know we had a chief of police several years, somebody that was a good police officer in the city, and he was offered the position of chief of police, but his wife and his family did not want to move into the city. And at that time, it was a requirement that all department heads live in the city. So he didn't take the position. He's doing a good job, but I think we also did well by having someone then that was appointed that did live in the city. So, I do understand that, but I think that as a taxpayer, we're paying these people six figures. We're talking about raising your taxes and your property tax, and you're not even giving back into the city because you don't live in the city.
Right.
I think there needs to be a requirement.
Like I said, there's an implied preference for somebody to live in the city, and if you don't, well, then you need two people to effectively sign off on that. You need two groups. You need the mayor to agree, well, I'm going to hire this person without them living in the city, and you need to convince city council that this person, and if 4 members of city council decide, we know somebody who lives in the city who could do the job and would do the job, they can overrule the mayor and say, no, we're not signing off on this. This person doesn't, we don't want him.
Right.
And send it right back to the mayor and say, now try again.
I'm okay with that compromise.
Like I said.
My only hesitation is from personal experience. My mother was a government employee, and as new administrations came in, she was constantly getting new bosses because they would just get shuffled out. So I think you have to be careful somebody could take the job, anticipate working here for 30, 40, 50 years, move to the city, new administration comes in and they get fired.
Well, I mean, I think Mr. Hamburger would tell you that he lives under no delusion that the next mayor might not just
No,
decide
I
you're
know that
unemployed.
comes with the territory.
And that's the job.
I get that, that's
you know,
the job.
We like to use the term, you serve at the pleasure of. And anybody at that level of government knows that coming in. Now, for the people working for them, they're the ones who are doing all the
But I
work
think-
anyway, so they're,
But to the point of, right, I mean, I think, yeah, right, I think that's widely understood.
yeah.
But then when you obligate somebody to relocate,
And that's what I'm saying, I don't think you should have to, I think, but you need, you know, obviously, we prefer somebody to live in the city, but we recognize that city council has decided this person really is the best from the job, the mayor has decided, going to defer to their opinion, that's idea. And so requiring that would create the same problem. Once you moved into the city, only to 36 months later, have a new mayor come in and say, oh, by the way, you're fired.
The strongest argument for me against the
I would agree
requirement
with
is
that.
what Ms. Bird's saying, like the cyclic nature of putting the money back into the local economy. Although I will say on the other end of that is, you know, with cars, there's no guarantee someone really is shopping and spending their money in the city. However, being a property owner in the city or a renter is a benefit. The tax is there. So I do hear it.
We already discussed the issue of what happens when the mayor owns two properties. You know, which one do they actually live in? Well, they get to decide. And so they live in the city, even though they spend 3 days a week somewhere else.
Right.
And we kind of
That
agree.
conversation.
They decided that was,
Well,
I
think
wasn't in that.
What
I wasn't in
Chairman
agreement
Adams
with
is
that.
saying is like, you know, you have to spend a majority of your year in the city to be a technical resident of the city from the get-go. But, you know, the mayor is, any elected official is allowed to own more properties
Yeah,
than
there's
the
a
one they
vagueness.
reside in.
Sort of gotten off track.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I would support language similar to the business administrator.
Yeah.
Where if, you know, where there's a requirement, but it can be waived. And if it's going to get waived, if you're going to waive it for,
I think especially in light
six department heads, well, you're going to have to do that in a city council meeting where you're,
Publicly,
where the
Yep.
public can come and complain and be like, why you can't find anybody?
sure, my Uncle Bob can do that job, why aren't you hiring him?
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
I think in light of the housing market too, that's a strong argument to have the ability for council themselves to waive that.
Well, I'm just looking at, if you look at our last department heads, none of them came from within the city. They all relocated to Lancaster from DC and elsewhere. It weren't like they were surrounding areas. So when we're searching, we got a broad net out there. So not to make that a requirement that you must come and represent our city and be a part of the city as a requirement for wanting that job. You know, I mean, like you said, we got a broad net. I look at teachers, you know, the net is broad in drawing people in. But if the commitment is not there, and like you say, hey, they may get fired, but they know that when they're uprooting from where they're coming from to come here.
I'd be
And so
okay.
to say, hey, look, maybe within a year, you have to, you know, we have to give them time because of the housing market. We can't say, oh, no, we're not going to appoint you. You don't live in the city. But it should be like, hey, you've been here a year. You need to find a house within the city.
I don't know if this would be an okay compromise for you, but like I'd be okay if we said like within a certain distance of the city. Like I know this isn't a home rule charter, but like I know Millersville Borough Code requires the borough manager to live within 5 miles of the borough, for example.
I saw that language in other charters.
Can this specificity be put into administrative code?
It could be.
Yeah.
And then the council can change it. Because it's in the
If you don't
administrative code.
address it at all, it would be a subject for the administrative.
Administrative code, yeah.
And I think we should address it.
And
We can write the
I'm
language.
going with, I prefer the, you know, they do not have to live in the city and with the approval of council, you know, that same
Yeah,
idea.
like they should, but it can be waived.
We'll draft it based on the same language
As the administrative director.
and for discussion purposes.
Yep.
It could be like the administrative, business administrator role. It could be waived, maybe as long as they live within a certain distance.
5 miles, 10 miles,
Yeah.
Whatever it is.
I don't want to limit, you know, I mean, I could see a limitation on the police chief. or on the Director of Administrative Services, something like that. But I can see roles where if the person's willing to drive 75 miles to work
Yeah.
every day and, and go back again, that's their problem. If they can come in and do their job, I don't think there's the requirement they have to live.
The benefit is what
Finance.
Darlene's talking about, which is they live here, they pay taxes, or property taxes are reflected in their rent. If that's that to me is the benefit of this requirement. If that's going to get waived, then if they live in Lancaster Township or if they live in Reading,
That would be
it's except for certain positions where
Like the police chief.
where travel time is a factor. But if if the director of community planning wants to commute an hour,
Yeah.
It's kind of on them, I guess.
kind of on them.
Because I think for me also is about making sure these individuals also experience the services that the city provides too. And I think that's an argument. Because if whomever's in charge of the water doesn't even drink the water here, that, they don't necessarily have a vested interest in making sure the water is to the best standard as possible. They just.
And that it actually works.
And it actually works. Yeah. So there's a multitude of reasons on both sides for this.
I'm still, I don't know what the consensus is. I'm still saying, same language we use for the administrative department heads do not have to live in the city, and their residency requirement can be waived by city council. I don't want to put any more limitations other than that.
We'll write that into the article
Right.
presented, and
Is
then you
that-
can see what it looks like.
Yeah.
And you could add qualifications if you need to.
Because I think we have a hard time selling that to the taxpayer. They say, why? I think we're going to have a hard time. We want a charter that they're going to buy into. We're talking about looking at property tax and earned income tax, and we're going to say our six-figure employees are not even going to pay earned income tax, but I'm going to raise yours.
Right.
I think that's going to be a hard sell. But,
Would it be possible to allow city council to make some, maybe if city council's like, we're okay with this, but kind of like a special condition,
I guess they can do what they
You know what I mean?
want, right?
I don't think we would write that into the charter.
okay.
I mean, that feels like a little more granular than.
Right. But what I mean, okay, I'll use the water example again. Whichever department head's responsible for the city service of water, ensuring that their residence is serviced by that water system. As a weird, I know it's kind of abstract and granular, but
You should say street clean.
No, you run risking opening up weird.
Getting ridiculous.
Yeah.
He finally,
Thank you, Mr. Barr.
Come on now.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we're moving on to the controller.
We are.
Wonderful.
So the decision was they're going to write it and we're going to get to review it. I just need to know.
Yeah.
Okay.
For now, we're going to
Just
use
so I
the
know.
same language as we do for the Director of Administrative Services, and you can see if that fits.
Okay, we're going to go to controller, and the controller article was drafted based on the decision made to have an elected controller and have a possibility of a deputy controller filling in for experience that may be lacking in an elected controller, or for the controller, we're thinking a requirement for more expertise in their office. This is essentially the article as written. I hope you can review it. There may be some more changes down the road on this as we refine powers and duties, but the qualifications are what was discussed by Ms. Campbell, Tina Campbell. We included the accountant item in there, which is in the current code. There's a bonding requirement, so if they're not able to be bonded for any reason, they would forfeit the office. There is an extensive list of powers and duties. Some of them have to be refined to mesh with the current financial oversight of the city. And that'll be cleaned up over the next iteration of this.
Now, this is the draft that the Budget and Finance Committee approved.
This is,
Just getting it.
No, this is go ahead, John.
yeah, I mean, we, at the end of our most recent meeting, worked through the key question about elected versus appointed, and, with the expansion to include the opportunity for an appointed deputy commissioner or deputy controller. And then we gave PEL the guidance to draft this based on other earlier discussions here and guidance from Tina Campbell for our consideration.
And on the code as exists today for the elected controller's responsibilities. But it has been expanded a bit from using just the basic oversight. So this is the draft elected controller article, as it was, John said.
Yep.
The big decision here was the inclusion of a deputy controller and the elected controller. The refinements that'll be possible over the next month would be in powers and duties.
This might sound, real quick question for the eligibility, because for everything else, we have 18 and this one's 21. Why is that?
I had 18 on my list.
I don't remember why. Was
I think
This
it's
commission,
18.
when they had the original discussion,
Was-
consensus was
21. I'd have to look back on the thing, but
I would agree.
we can certainly make that 18.
We heard about financial oversight, audit experience.
Okay.
There was a lot
Yeah,
of
we just,
discussion.
I have this recollection of we were going through the list of questions, said, I think 21 is good for
That
a
was when we were
controller.
going through
I
the.
think
All right.
Stratus wanted 45.
I did.
There was a lengthy discussion, so.
Yeah.
So not to hash anything out, but when we do talk about the full charter, I'm going to point this out when we talk about the mayor section.
Okay.
The controller may be older than the mayor.
Yeah.
Well, the qualifications kind of fit in with a 21 as an accountant, if you think about a college degree
having graduated
somehow
from college.
yeah. Although there's 18-year-olds that serve in family businesses that can probably teach them courses, so that's a refinement if you want to do it so your job is to take a look at this. It'll be refined as further needed, but right now, this is the draft article, as it's gone through the mill.
I'm okay with keeping it like that. I'm just saying I'll circle this back for other conversations.
Okay. Fred is pointing out a couple of other tweaks I was mentioning. When you see oversight on the first one under A, it would be more review. The controller wouldn't be oversight because you have a purchasing department. I think under the solicitor, there's a department of purchasing. So it would be more of a review function as the controller.
Which part are
Where-
you talking
yeah.
about?
Right there. Oh, isn't it up there, Lynn? Lynn, 405B.
No,
Scroll down,
405.
there it is. 405B. Well, wait a minute.
I heard you say A.
Oh, I said A, it is A, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I looked at it again as B.
I think there's something worth missing.
405 and
Oh, okay, and then another suggestion is conduct, in B now, we're in 405B,
where's
conduct a pre-audit of invoices and countersign documents.
I'm sorry, what were you saying about 405A?
405A, review, have financial oversight be replaced with review
Okay,
of city finances,
okay.
Oversight.
is review, and then,
I'm just worried about a legal challenge to who controls
right.
the mayor or
So, then B, you revise it to say, conduct a pre-audit of invoices, right? Of invoices, right here. Right, of invoices, and countersign all documents authorizing the payment of money. Okay. And that's it for that? All right,
So we should just read that.
I would read that, and we can
Okay.
bring questions to the table for the next meeting. If not, we're going to just move it through the process
Okay.
as a draft article. Budget and finance is next.
The next article that has been drafted based on the work of the Budget and Finance Committee, under John's leadership, is the Budget and Finance Article 10. And again, much like was discussed with the controller, this article has been drafted based on the hard work and diligent effort of the committee. It does provide a much more transparent budget process, a longer time period associated with the budget development and review process. It also includes a provision for a capital plan and budget, and again, a similar review process for it, albeit the capital budget would be done prior to the operating budget, so the capital budget elements for the subsequent year would then be factored into the operating budget.
Okay.
And Mr. McGran, I, ask if you have further comments that you would like to make based on your chairmanship of the committee?
Sure, yeah, I'd be happy to, and I'd invite Darlene to supplement anything I say. I think that we, I think the things that we're focused on a lot of things, but, in section 1002, right, close to the top of the first page, starting the budget process quite a bit earlier, on or before the last scheduled meeting in October, it is a big improvement over the current situation where it only starts in December. And we were, I think there will be, hang on, I'm sorry, it's been working through this for, but I think that we, creating more opportunities. So what the benefit of that is, first of all, there will be an opportunity for a improved budget hearing process. Currently the budget hearing process is one long Saturday in December. This creates the opportunity both for a more luxurious budget hearing process, as well as many more intervening city council meetings, so that there's just a lot more opportunity for public input during the process of approving the budget.
May I ask what all the highlights reference?
Just to really, in several instances, there are questions that are worth discussing.
Okay.
And in other instances, it's just to stress particular issues, particular changes.
And then, as Fred was saying, I think the other notable thing is requiring a capital budget. That process starts earlier in the year, that would come in June. Oh, there you go. That would be June 30th.
Where's that at, John?
That is, I'm sorry, now I'm on page 4, section 1007.
Thank you.
The idea there being, to give an example, the example that came up during our conversation is that, sometime in the last month, City Council approved the purchase of a new fire truck. We don't know, or I don't even know, I'm assuming they did.
I don't know if it passed, but it was on the agenda.
But it was on the agenda, right? And we, didn't investigate this, but we don't know, is that something that City Council has known was coming for 2 years? Or did they learn about it in May? Things like, investments in equipment, buildings, water infrastructure, sewer infrastructure, things like that, they are known, those are known, planned for, and can be forecasted. And so we're including, an expectation, a requirement that be that be, in part of the budgeting process, that the capital budget planning begins earlier than the annual budget planning.
Yeah.
So that it can be integrated into the annual budget planning. In both cases, so in the case of the capital budget, we're asking for a 5-year projection, which becomes, less, a little fuzzier as you get into years 3, 4, and 5, but it's still meaningful. And then with the annual budget, we're asking for the upcoming year plus 2 years?
Right.
Plus 2?
Plus
Plus
two.
two.
Yeah, the budget year plus 2 more, so it's a 3-year.
Right.
Yeah.
So not only asking for, improved process related to the upcoming annual budget, but also asking for, requiring, a longer-term outlook so that if a fiscal cliff is on the horizon, that's, part of the discussion and that we're not just,
I like that.
taking it a year at a time. And then, on page 6, I don't know what section, but item 2, also requiring quarterly budget review. So that, 4 times a year, the administration comes to city council and reports on how the budget is going year to date. So Darlene, is there anything that I didn't highlight that you think deserves to be highlighted?
John, what was the time frame of the review? Only annually versus the quarterly budget that we're putting here now?
I'm sorry, ask me that again a different way, please?
What is the way that they conduct the review now? Annually? Yeah, that's.
Yeah, just
They do it.
Yeah.
I don't know that, I guess there is one. I mean, but, it's, yeah.
Okay.
I don't know that there's
Yeah.
I don't know that there's currently a requirement for budget reporting throughout the year.
Budget review?
Well, they provide council with monthly statements.
I mean, they get,
Reporting,
Right.
in terms of reporting out to the public, in terms of the public reporting.
Right.
right,
No, the mayor does it once a year currently in her annual State of the City address, which is maintained. You have an annual provision here.
right.
You've added reporting out quarterly so that there's more public and accounting of
Yes.
quarter annually.
And it's probably worth mentioning, I think, we did have both the mayor and Director Tina Campbell on hand for some of these discussions. And a lot of what we included in here, they welcomed and felt like, was an improvement to them as well.
I like a lot of this.
Good job.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
So,
The only
It's the
question,
reason we're here, is what it comes down to.
right.
the only question I have
Yeah,
is, we were talking about the creation of new departments earlier. Do we potentially have avenues to address any of that?
Capital.
The-
No,
I mean,
it's capital
Because
program.
I worry about the idea of I agree with the 5-year timeline, but when creating something new, I go, okay, how does that new department, if it were to be created, address that 5-year time span? Because they would be starting from 0. That's all I really have to comment.
Yes. Yeah, and, and I think on the one hand, as we're adding a requirement for, in the annual budget for the upcoming year plus 2 years, if there's some idea of a new department,
Okay.
it ought to be, it ought to be included in that. You wouldn't think a new department would come, out of nowhere.
Right, okay.
So on the one hand, it ought to be in there.
Right.
You
And that makes sense,
I mean, I
because
guess
I was
it could-
thinking of the two, because on one hand, we've recently created a department that's relatively small compared to the other ones.
Right.
But then if EMS were to be something that comes into play in the future,
Right.
that's obviously more like a police fire type area.
Right.
So that's all the comment I really have, but I think you've addressed my concern. If a
One-
new idea comes up, it will be addressed in that 2 years.
One thing that may help you with this concept is to stop thinking about, when you're thinking departments, you're actually thinking services.
Right.
Okay, so keep in mind, services cost money, right? You could take our Department of Administrative Services and break it out into 4 departments, and it wouldn't cost you any additional money.
Right.
It's the same thing, just named differently.
Sure.
So what everything that's been built in that you folks have already started drafting and proposed here, the check and balance is there because council has to approve the expenditure of the money through your budget process. If you're going to create a department where you're changing the legal structure of the city, you have to have that done by ordinance as well. So, but I think as you think about things like what you're talking about, Mr. Dasher, really is adding a service. So if we went to EMS, that doesn't necessarily have to be a new department. That could actually end up being part of fire, as I indicated earlier.
Right.
Don't
Which,
have that.
it's not the department that's coming back to city council, it's the additional
We can
expense,
give
the
them-
additional
I like
expense of
Give
an
them
additional
this
service.
and
So,
let them look at
You
it.
know, as you start thinking about what you're doing, that's also one of the things to think about as you explain this through the educational component as you move forward, because people do get confused and think department is in and of itself a service, and that's not necessarily true.
Right. I like that.
Darlene, is there anything you'd add to all this?
The only thing that, first I just got a question, not necessarily to deal with this, but who enforces the ordinance? Is that something that council is to enforce? If they adopt all these ordinance, who is the enforcement of the ordinance?
It depends on the ordinance.
Okay.
So, currently, the way ordinances are drafted that have penalties and fines, those penalties and fines are based on the third-class city code or the optional charter law or some other Pennsylvania law that authorizes the municipality to establish a penalty. Typically, when we draft ordinances, you're also drafting who's in charge of enforcing it. Now, with an ordinance like the budget ordinance, it's not really an enforcement mechanism because failure to comply means you don't have a validly adopted budget, which means that all of your expenditures essentially can be challenged and you could maybe potentially not be able to write a check. So when you talk about the budget ordinance, you're not really looking at one person to enforce
Okay.
it. The reality is the administration and council have an obligation to comply. Otherwise, they risk not having the ability to utilize the revenue or to have a tax ordinance or all the other things.
Right. Okay. And back to the draft, the only thing, and I think I mentioned this at our discussion, and I think it was somehow included, but I don't see it at 1006. I talked about having the capital budget section being separate from the annual budget reporting. Remember, I mentioned that about making sure it was separate because I said about the budget, all these showing here, in the 5 years. I think it was under 106, but I don't see that on there, that budget would be a separate section.
107.
107,
Oh, it's on
108,
107. I thought we did it on 106. That's what I have in my
108 is
notes.
capital program.
right,
Is that what you're looking for?
and 109 actually continues.
Yeah, 109.
Okay.
And can I just clarify, Barry, what you said, the services that we're talking about, that we mentioned could be added, can be provided independent of adding another department?
Sure.
That's what you were saying, okay.
Sure, there's no requirement to have a department to monitor services, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you could
Expand
have.
services like crazy without adding department.
Well, I mean, I'll use an example because it's come up multiple times even tonight and throughout the meeting. So before the Department of Neighborhood Services was actually created, there was an office of neighborhood engagement, which was under the mayor's direction.
Exactly.
It was changed it was operated the same way. It was just formalized as a department. It didn't change anything other than the legal title, didn't add anything, take anything. It was, whether it was in that part of the budget under the mayor's budget or whether it was under the department's budget, it was the same service being provided. So the service was added long before the department was added.
Exactly.
That service was added, I believe, in 2018,
28.
but the
yeah.
department was created in 2023, right? But the service was already there.
Right.
So council didn't all of a sudden adopt a new service in 2023. They restructured how that service looked on paper in terms of who it reported to and how. But that is function over form, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I understand.
It's just that my understanding as the department, even as we're looking at the departments preparing a budget, finances is different versus services, because now you have a department requiring that, and the salaries of a department head versus a service provider under the Office of Engagement is different. So, I mean, I mean, just so that we understand when we are talking about departments, the service is the same, but the dollar figure is not the same.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I want to go back to Barry's comment on the adoption of the budget or what happens if the budget is not adopted in
Yeah,
you two
don't
sections.
get adopted. Remember we had that big discussion?
10 or 1005, council action on budget, which talks about the publication notice, the possible amendment to the budget by council, and then under number 4, adoption, council shall adopt the budget 16 days, on or before 16 days prior to the end of the fiscal year, and that time period is to allow for the possibility of a veto. But then further, and I'd like some discussion on this, if council fails to adopt a budget by that date, the budget proposed by the mayor shall be the official budget for the city for the ensuing fiscal year. In other words, we're giving a deadline for council to act, and if they have not acted, then the proposed budget becomes the budget for the city.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
Well,
I would just note, that is an improvement over the existing code. So I can tell you, having guided councils, that's one of the biggest fears the solicitor has for every municipality that's working as a third-class city or a borough, that if they don't adopt it, they get into some political fight, there's no fallback. And then the operations of that municipality, technically as a matter of law, are going to essentially cease to exist. So this is a proposal that Pell has provided that's an improvement on that, to provide, same thing you've been doing everywhere else, flexibility and also a fallback. Like, let's make sure there's a way for those services that we were just talking about to continue.
Because without such a provision, there's no authority to extend funds into the next year.
I like that.
Makes
Okay.
sense.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Where we talk about 10 days, let's just say, for example, in section 1005, number 4, where we talk about the number of days, 10 days in number 3, 16 days in number 4, 10 days in number 6. Is there any need to clarify business days versus just days?
You don't want to do business days, that extends the time.
Right.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Is
Yeah.
there any?
So we
You
said days.
don't want to, yeah,
Okay.
I agree with Barry,
I want to say days.
correct.
Okay,
Because
And-
otherwise you're going to run out the clock and it's not going to work.
okay.
We want to include Saturdays, Sundays, holidays, so they have time to.
And just for clarity for number 5, where we talk about the mayor's veto, why I think PL brought it up, because I think John and Carl and myself, well, the commissioners, we all had different views about what should happen there. If it would go back to the mayor's approval, if council does not, then the mayor's really presenting her own budget. I mean, and right now in the federal government and in state government, there's an impasse. If there's not an approval of the budget, one of the recommendations I know that I said is I think the essential workers should be paid, but we shouldn't be able to spend money if the budget is not approved. It shouldn't just automatically default to what the mayor presented as the budget when council turned it down. You know what I mean? And then it's like, if they don't come together, well, then we're going to do what the mayor says anyway.
Right.
And I think that, it shouldn't be like that. I just think, again, we're putting too much power into the mayor having that say. That's why council is there. That's the checks and balance. So if the mayor and council, we don't force them to work things out, we just say, well, then the mayor has her way. And that was one of the discussions, and I forget what way you was suggesting, John.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for.
Oh, yeah, it was different than, yeah, so we had 3 different viewpoints under that, and not just letting it go back to the mayor.
Sure.
Because, we
I guess
defeat
I
our
feel
whole
like if they
purpose.
start the budget process in October, in 16 days before the end of the year, so that's December, they have not figured out how to negotiate, and I'm all for this as the very end of the line fail-safe. I mean, that's just me.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, we see it at the state level, we see it at the federal level.
Have we
And-
had it at the city level?
implementing what Ms. Bird is suggesting at the city level would be infinitely difficult because, first of all, you're paying workers, but the workers can't work if there's not other money to pay for a lot of the things that are done.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the services will stop. If there's no, if the way, I don't know how you can have a tax ordinance. So if you don't have the tax ordinance, you don't have tax revenue. The states have different powers than the city does because you're controlled by your tax revenue. I don't see a way realistically to have an ability to continue making payments with no revenue coming in. And you can't have the revenue coming in if you don't pass a budget, because if you don't pass the budget, you can't have a tax ordinance.
Well,
It doesn't.
I will say something like water, though. Water brings in a revenue, doesn't it? To
It
pay
brings in some revenue, but again, at some point, it's not gonna be enough.
Right. No. I get that. I mean, I guess all I'm really saying is I would be open to a little bit of something what Ms. Bird is suggesting, but it does need to be clear for me.
Yeah, I think, my comment on this is, I think there is a, what I would consider a well-defined process for both, the council to amend the budget with,
Right.
with, appropriate majority and, a line item veto option for the mayor. So there are paths for the budget to be refined.
Negotiated.
Negotiated and refined, that's
Yeah.
right. That can, if council is just saying, we just won't approve it, then it just goes into effect.
Right.
There's a path, there are ways for that to get addressed within this charter.
The mayor administers the budget. So at the end of the day, if the budget of the mayor is a faulty budget, they're living with that for a year. If the council gives the mayor a budget that's unworkable and the mayor vetoes it, and they don't sustain the veto, the mayor still has to administer the budget. So you're
Exactly.
trying to balance all those. At the end of the day, the mayor is responsible for making sure the budget works. So there's an incentive on both sides.
Right. Yeah. I mean, no. Go ahead, Ms. Bird.
No, and I'm thinking the incentive is that they have to come together. I mean, for the people, are like we say, we need to vote them out. If they cannot come up and come in agreement, we give them, I think John said, the line item veto. So it's not they're vetoing the whole budget. It could be a line item adjustment. But I think at one point, the mayor and the council need to agree. I don't think it should just be up to the mayor to say, well, you didn't agree with me. We're going to go with his budget anyway.
But there's also a veto override path.
Right.
It's like, they can amend it, the mayor can veto it, they can, with a supermajority, override the veto.
Right.
I mean-
Just for some background, I've worked in a city where there was total impasse between the mayor and the council. The council passed an unworkable budget because they had a supermajority of council. They passed a simply unworkable budget. The mayor tried to veto it, failed. The city literally ran out of money in March. Made national headlines because, as Barry said, you can only spend the cash you
What you
have
have.
in the bank. You have no taxing ability, you have nothing. They literally ran out of money. The state had to loan them over $2 million to keep, it was Governor Corbett at that time.
Right.
They had the National Guard standing by, the police, and run the fire. All because of a political, and by August of that year, the political dam was broken because the council backed down and said, we'll raise taxes. And that was in 2012. I mean, I lived a real world example where you think people will come to their senses. Instead, they just entrench themselves even more. And the people that suffered were the citizens and the employees.
No.
They literally cannot run the city. It becomes a real problem.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree with you there. That's why I say, like, if something like what Ms. Bird is suggesting were to come into play, it would have to be very clear for me because, like, yeah, at the end of the day, if we don't fund the police, the state can always step in, but we don't want that. Like, if at the end of the day, if fire doesn't get funded, there are mutual aid agreements, but we don't want that. That's not unworkable.
It's not that easy, though.
Right. No. It's super painful, and that's why I say, like, if there were to be provisions like that for whatever case, for me to agree with it, it'd have to be very, very clear to me, but I like this. This sounds
Yeah.
good to me.
It'd be very difficult to do otherwise. Okay, is there other things that we have to talk about with it? We have the preamble to put up on the board. I know we're sort of abusing our time a little bit, but.
I'm good with getting through what we can get through. So,
We have the preamble up, so this is the,
We do.
Mr. Barber's on the phone, but this is the preamble, or Tony, you're on the committee.
Oh.
So this is the preamble,
I put in some punctuation while we were sitting here.
the power of the blue pencil.
Sorry about that, but yeah. You needed some commas and stuff.
Fair enough, you can punctuate.
Thank you.
So again, I mean, if I can just speak to this, I mean, we had talked about this previously being very simple, very concise,
We can
kind of get things as the initial
I could put a.
vision and an aspirational vision for what we were hoping to accomplish with this. And knowing that this is going to be the first thing that people read as they start going through it, we wanted to make sure that it was easily accessible and easily digestible. So at the risk of it seeming very simple, I think it actually, and Tony, I think you agreed as well, that it kind of hits the mark in terms of just keeping it simple and aspirational and really hitting the major tenets of what we were hoping to accomplish with all this.
Yes. Yeah. No, actually, I only have one comment if we're all amenable to it. I'd like to see the word people capitalized.
Random capitals. There we go.
I don't think that.
Somebody's
that
not happy with that.
I don't think that would.
I'll accept that.
There is a logic of the difference between people as a general sense and people as a specific people, and you would capitalize the specific people, sure.
Capitalize all of it, we the people.
I'm fine. I think it's good. Thanks for writing it.
Yes, I like it. I like it very much.
My punctuation.
Yeah, you got it there.
Perfect.
Okay, all right, Mr. Chairman?
All right, so we're not going to be getting to ordinances or referendum.
Well, we,
Referendum.
well, let me explain where we are, and Fred, jump in. We have the printed copy. It was distributed to everybody in electronic. I think we have it. Mr. Feldman had asked that we consider a flow chart because this seems to be rather convoluted. I admit that I have to read these things several times, so you have to get in a frame of mind to understand this process. It's a very detailed, specific process because we're presenting a right of the people as opposed to the other charter articles where you try to be broad and flexible. In this case, you want to be very specific and outline the rights of the citizens to control the government through the ballot of a referendum. There's three parts to this.
Working on a flow chart?
I'm going to try. Because there's three parts here. Referendum, well, there's ordinance introduction by the citizens. There's a referendum and reconsideration of ordinances already passed by citizens. So they can, ultimately approve or refuse. And then there is a ability to call a special meeting of the council for one purpose. So essentially creating an agenda by the citizens to consider one item. And we have a flow. The process is all there. It's relatively the same process, but you have to understand there's a petitioners committee, there's signatures. We have to decide on the number of signatures that you want to have to go forward because it's a serious situation. All those things, and we'll try to do a little flow chart. So I'd like to hit this the next meeting.
Okay.
Because this is really getting to the heart of
It's a very
home rule
important part.
and people's rights.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think a key consideration here are going to be the numbers. And as you look at the document that was distributed electronically, we have the process, as Jerry indicated, broken into three different areas. The number of signatures required is going to be a decision that the commission is going to need to make.
So you do not have to answer this now. One question I had about that is, so you defined those three different sort of citizen
Powers, rights.
powers.
Rights, yeah.
Do all of the signatures have to be the same for all three of those.
The number of
Well,
required.
that's one.
Oh,
No, that's,
We'd be
They
deciding.
don't all
No, and I-
require they don't all require signatures, right?
no, well, anything that requires a petition or referendum does require
They
signatures,
all
yes.
require
And we would
signatures.
want, like,
The numbers can be different for each of the three categories.
How many citizens
Yeah.
how many citizens is the minimum to call a council meeting?
Right.
Will be different, I think, than the number of citizens to reconsider an ordinance of council, or
That's what I
the
was
number
trying
of
to get
citizens
at.
to put an ordinance on the agenda.
When you read it, and I have the luxury of getting it the day before, so when you read it, you'll see it actually says,
Okay,
says
great.
that in there, that,
Great.
you know, to be
That was my
determined,
biggest
this number, yes.
Okay,
And there's, you could do it as a percentage of the vote of the mayor or the governor,
Yeah.
or you could put a specific number in.
Yeah,
So that's what we'll be talking about. But the
Okay.
process itself, we tried to design this so that it's a citizen right and it's specific.
okay.
So if you have problems with the process, that's fine. But you'll understand the process through the flow chart, and then we just have to talk about the size of the door. How big is the door to let people in?
Okay,
If
great.
you're questioning why the process is so detailed, it's because of attorneys.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
No, in all honesty, when I had discussions with Pell about this, laying out very specifically the procedures so that you couldn't have, whether it's council or somebody, prevent the citizens from exercising their rights. The most important part about this section is that it is a roadmap to a non-attorney on how they can exercise their rights.
okay.
Yeah, we wanted the citizens to be able to get the charter and read it. And that's what they had to do, not worry about the administrative code, not worry about an ordinance that was changed 2 years ago. The charter says it, and this is my right. And the only way you could change that right is by changing the charter.
Okay.
Okay, moving on. Subcommittee reports,
I guess if you keep these.
going down the line, public engagement, what would you?
I wasn't at the last meeting, but I do have two events that we need to assign people to. I was given the incorrect date for the Musser Civic Association music event. It's not on June 25th, it's on June 29th from 6 to 8, and we need two people to do that.
On the 29th?
Yeah.
I'll do it.
Can somebody join, Tony? I mean, I'll join you if nobody else does,
What
but
time is that?
6 to 8 at Musser Park.
Are we still having our June 29th?
no,
Saturday meeting?
they said we wouldn't have that.
That was one thing, that's
That's
under,
before you
under
came.
other business,
That's under
whether we
other business.
need it, but the general idea beforehand was that we don't.
Okay. Saturday the 29th, 6 to 8. I can do that.
Then the next one is a presentation to the Lancaster Downtowners on July 16th at 2 o'clock. I can do it, but I need somebody to come with me.
You said 16th at 2
Yeah.
o'clock?
Yeah, 16th, it's 2 o'clock. I know it's
July
not a,
16th?
yeah,
What day of the week is that?
I have no idea.
Tuesday.
And it'd be over by, would it be over by 4?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Probably be
do that.
over, well
I-
before that.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, great, thanks. We'll also be going to the San Juan Bautista Festival. I do not have details, but it is in terms of the hours, but it's July 24th through 27th, so I would ask that all the commissioners, just whatever time you can block on your calendar, block something so that we have enough people to work the whole event. Once I know the times, I'll let you know.
I definitely will try to be there as much as possible.
So that's San Juan Bautista.
Yeah.
This might sound crazy, but do we maybe even want to have some bilingual services there as well? That's part of why.
It doesn't sound crazy. I'll talk to, we can ask we'll ask
Yeah.
city about that.
Yeah.
Crazy, Tony.
Crazy.
You're there.
Well, I mean, yeah, but I have limitations.
Okay. Is that it?
I'm just looking over my,
I didn't go to the meeting, so I'm not really
Um,
sure. I know that
Yeah,
Maxine has
no.
gotten the Instagram page up, so if you are
Yeah.
on Instagram, please find it, like it, like the things. And the city has been populating more of our posts also in the
Yes,
last
they
week.
have.
Yeah.
Find it at HRSC Lancaster PA.
Thank you.
That's the IG page. What did you mention?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the only thing I would add is, I would add two things. We did, I think we spent a little bit of time at the Public Engagement Committee meeting. I mean, I think our intention is, next week, when we meet next week, we're going to try to really fine tune the schedule for the public hearings and related things.
Right.
And with Maxine's help, we made a recording of the PowerPoint presentation.
Yes.
So we did our part. It is in DJ's hands for some editing, but it wasn't perfect, but it was pretty good.
It's pretty good.
I think,
Awesome.
yeah,
Good
so,
job.
so that should be, that was done Friday morning, and so that will hopefully be available. And I would say, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if we choose to do that again later. Once we get, I think there'll be an opportunity to expand the presentation to include some more specifics about
For sure.
the articles, so we may want to do that again. But yeah, it went really smooth.
It went really good.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah,
Thanks,
so,
DJ.
Brian and I went and met with the SACA and CAPS leadership team this past week. One of the things that the SACA folks said is that we can come on the radio station as often as we want. And something I was thinking about is because this is complicated, like once we get the
Yeah.
final, maybe
Yeah.
we go on weekly and we talk about one thing, like one specific element. So that's, again, something that we just
Yeah.
have to plan out.
Yeah. Well, Ann and I are communicating a little bit now, so
Good.
we can fine tune that. Yeah, great.
Those are the kinds of things that I can put on the Instagram page.
Right.
That's coming up.
Actually, on the note of like all the Samuel Batista Saka, question for everybody, and this also kind of goes to Barry as well. Can we adopt a bilingual charter?
Adopt a bilingual or have it in another language? It's going to be translated
I
into
know,
Spanish.
I know it will be translated, but I mean, like, I feel like it is representative of the city. There's so many people who speak Spanish here to have it codified in both languages.
I don't see why not.
You could have it codified in both languages. It's not a problem. The only thing I would say is with the charter, we'd want to send it out to a professional.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Professional translator, and not that our in-house staff can't do it, but you don't want any argument. And one of the issues
Right.
that comes up with translation is that languages don't always necessarily match up. An English word does not necessarily have an exact word in Spanish. In all
Understand
cases.
completely.
So, yeah, usually, that's the only issue I would have is making sure that we vetted that pretty thoroughly.
Right.
I would suggest, however, that if you do that, you add a provision that indicates if seems to be any conflict between the English version and the Spanish version, that the English version controls.
Okay.
The English version of controls.
Correct.
Yeah.
That if there's a discrepancy, because of the translation, it's the English version that will be ultimately handled by a court or somebody on a challenge.
I do understand that, but thank you. Yeah, because I think that'll go a long way to help represent some of the community here.
Okay, moving on. I'm assuming the preamble committee is done with their work. Thank you, Mr. Barber, and the others. So there's nothing to report? I don't hear anything, so.
Nothing to report.
Grant, wonderful. Mr. Feldman's not here. He did send out a report from the Ethics Commission. Where there is a draft of language for it, which has that gone out?
Yes.
No,
Okay.
if Mr. Feldman asked the question,
Okay,
they're going to review it when they come up to the meeting the first week of July.
you'll
I think
review it and then, okay.
Right.
Okay, because what I saw, I really liked. And so,
I think we agreed on some common grounds for the
Yeah.
ethics code. There were some things that we all agreed on.
Yeah.
I didn't get to read this whole document yet, so I don't know, but we did come in.
It's good.
Yeah, it was good.
good read, yeah. All right. Okay, budget and finance, as you're coming to the
Basically,
end.
got our report.
You got our, yeah.
So I don't think, I can't think of anything else that we would need to, to report other than the results that we got to review earlier tonight? Is there anything that,
You don't know how good it sounds to hear, nope, we finished what we've done. What a report.
yeah, because that was, I'm looking over the minutes from our last meeting and,
We're still going to talk about the taxing authority and stuff. We didn't.
yeah, I mean, we
have other things to discuss.
we have a few, we do have some other additional meetings coming up.
Right.
Where we talk about taxing authority and stuff like that, but,
John, by taxing authority,
Carl put that out a
Carl-
couple meetings ago, did he?
yeah, Carl has a,
He wanted it on the agenda.
I can follow up with you
Okay,
to tell you more,
right.
make sure that we're all on the same page.
Yeah,
I
because the only
think,
thing that you were gonna opine on tax limits or
Yeah.
revenue limits, but there was also a question of whether the charter had to even mention, I had a conversation with Carl about that.
Okay.
Okay, so I guess that's coming up on Monday, because that's
I
the next meeting,
think, I'll review, I'll refer back to
Monday, yeah.
my notes from Carl and whatever that is,
Yeah.
need to be, would be on the agenda for Monday, and I'll follow up to you
Not
tomorrow.
this
Talking about
Monday,
Monday, right?
the
To,
following Monday, the 24th, right?
Monday.
Yeah, maybe.
I have the
come back
24th.
for Other things.
Am I
I
off
know I talked
by a
to
week?
Carl about it.
Well, this is Monday is the 24th.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, we did have this meeting.
Okay,
Got so many meetings
Yeah.
there.
all right.
Yep, I
Moving
got
on.
it down.
City council meeting is holding their first meeting in a minute or two.
Yes.
Is there anything to report before you actually have anything to report?
No, I'll just say that we're currently setting dates, and I'm going to be as adaptable as possible. In fact, since we might not be using that Saturday, I'm going to ask the other commissioners if maybe we can use that Saturday, because I do understand there's a time crunch, and also Saturday meetings might be good for members of the public to join us for matters, and I'll be talking to PEL a lot in the next few days.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to feel, yeah, go ahead.
Any? Great, wonderful, thank you. Any old business? Okay, hearing none, I will put in, under other business, we tentatively said 2 hours ago that we would not be meeting on the 25th or the 29th of June.
Are we?
I'll defer to you. Are we good to not meet on the 29th?
I think so.
I think so.
I think that sounds wonderful to me.
Clarification of the date.
Yep. So, Mr.
There is
Harris,
additional
the
time.
commission will no longer be meeting on the 28th,
We're taking that
29th,
date.
if you can provide whatever we
Well,
do
this
to
is
cancel the meeting.
general. We'll get there.
And if city council, they would be in touch. So, thank you very much. Any other business for the good of the commission?
Yeah, I just want to say for other business, I have a list of questions and I will provide them. I'm sending them out this week to get answers to, and I'll provide those questions to the
Okay.
commissioners because I would like them to be part of the record.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Any public comments?
No.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Without objection,
Bye, Pete.
we stand down. Thank you very much. I will see you all on July the 2nd.
Right, Tuesday, July 2nd.
Yes.
July 2nd.
DJ just sent the video recording. Yeah, I forwarded
Maybe
it.
Just send it to
Oh,
DJ.
It's always
So
great.
I'm gonna look at it,
Yeah.
unless I hear from you guys, I'll have them posted.
Yeah,
Yeah, well,
I'm-
I want to see it.
I'm gonna,